February is the month that reveals who truly understands their garden. While others flip through seed catalogs and imagine perfect rows of tomatoes, the observant gardener is already outside. They are reading the language written in thawing, soil, and swelling buds. This is the Hinge month, the pivot point between winter's dormancy and spring's explosive growth. What you do in February determines whether you will spend April in a state of calm productivity or complete chaos. If you are finding value in these methods, subscribe to the channel. It helps us reach more gardeners who are ready to work smarter instead of harder. And if this approach resonates with you, leave a like. It tells us to keep sharing the quiet wisdom that conventional gardening often ignores. The gardener who understands February moves with quiet purpose. They know that preparation is not glamorous, but it is everything. The gardener who ignores February will find themselves caught flat-footed when the season turns. They will scramble to repair tools, test soil, and start seeds that should have been growing for weeks. But here is what makes February so interesting. There is no single February garden anywhere in North America. The work happening in Minnesota bears almost no resemblance to the work happening in Georgia, and the California gardener operates on an entirely different calendar than both. Today, we are breaking down the regional strategies that make February productive. We are exploring the universal principles that apply to every climate and every gardener. This is how you use the quietest month to build momentum for the entire growing season. The gardener in the cold climate zones faces a unique psychological challenge in February. The ground remains frozen solid. Snow still blankets the beds where summer tomatoes will eventually grow. It would be easy to believe that nothing can be done, that February is simply a month of waiting for spring's arrival. But this belief is the difference between a mediocre season and an exceptional one. The cold climate gardener must understand that February is primarily a month of indoor preparation and strategic planning. This is when you start your slow-growing perennials from seed. Onions require 10 to 12 weeks before they are ready to transplant. If you wait until March to start them, you lose an entire month of growing time. Your harvest will be smaller and later than it should have been. The same principle applies to early brassicas. Cabbage, broccoli, and cauliflower need 6 to 8 weeks of indoor growth before they can handle the garden. By starting them in mid to late February, they are ready to transplant the moment the soil becomes workable in April. The cold climate gardener also uses February for something even more valuable than seed starting. They use it for observation and note-taking. Walk your frozen garden with a notebook in hand. Look at where water pools when the snow melts and runs across the surface. These wet spots will become problem areas once you plant. They will harbor disease and drown sensitive seedlings in heavy spring rains. Note them now while they are obvious. Plan to build raised beds or improve drainage before planting season arrives. Look at where the snow melts first. These are your warmest microclimates, protected from wind and receiving maximum sun exposure. These spots are where you can push the season slightly earlier, where you can plant cold hardy crops a week or two before the rest of the garden. The observant gardener builds a mental map of their property. They know which areas wake up first and which ones stay cold and damp. This knowledge cannot be gained by reading books or watching videos. It can only be learned by spending time in your specific garden during the transition months. February in the cold zones is also the final window for winter pruning. The trees and shrubs are still dormant, but time is running short. Fruit trees should be pruned before the sap begins to rise. Once the buds start swelling, the pruning window has closed for another year. Grapes must be cut back severely in late winter. If you wait until spring, they will bleed sap from every cut and potentially weaken the vine. Berry bushes benefit from removal of dead canes and thinning of overcrowded growth. This opens up airflow and concentrates energy into fewer, more productive stems. The gardener who prunes in February works with calm precision. They can see the structure of each plant clearly without the distraction of leaves. They remove crossing branches that will rub and create wounds. They eliminate diseased or damaged wood before it spreads problems to healthy tissue. This work is cold and sometimes uncomfortable. Your fingers may go numb holding the pruning shears in freezing air. But it is work that multiplies its value tenfold when harvest season arrives. Every careful cut you make now becomes pounds of fruit in July and August. The moderate climate gardener experiences February differently. Their ground is not frozen, but it is often too wet to work. This wetness is the central challenge of the moderate climate February. The soil is saturated from winter rains and slow to drain. If you try to dig or plant in this mud, you will compact the soil structure. You will create a hard, airless layer that roots cannot penetrate. Ruth Stout understood this principle perfectly. She never disturbed wet soil because she knew it would take years for the damage to heal. The moderate climate gardener must develop patience. They must resist the urge to get into the garden before conditions are actually ready. How do you know when soil is workable? Take a handful and squeeze it firmly in your palm. If water drips out, the soil is too wet. If the ball holds together in a tight, slick mass, it is still too wet. But if the ball crumbles apart when you poke it with your finger, the soil is ready. It has enough moisture for planting, but not so much that you will cause compaction. In moderate climates, there may be a brief window of workable soil in mid to late February. This is when you can direct sow your first hardy crops. Peas are the classic February planting for zone 7 and 8. They tolerate cold soil and actually prefer to germinate in cool conditions. Spinach, lettuce, and arugula can all go into the ground as soon as you can work it. They will grow slowly at first, but they will establish strong roots. By the time April arrives and temperatures climb, these plants will already be mature enough to harvest. You will be eating fresh greens while others are just planting seeds. Potatoes are another traditional February crop in moderate climates. They need 6 to 8 weeks in cool soil to develop strong root systems. Plant them too late and they will struggle in the heat of summer. Plant them in February and they produce abundantly before the real heat arrives. The moderate climate gardener also has access to bare root planting opportunities in February. This is when nurseries receive their shipments of dormant fruit trees, berries, and roses. Bare root plants are cheaper than potted ones, but more importantly, they establish better when planted while still fully dormant. The roots have time to spread and anchor themselves before the plant needs to support new leaf growth. This creates a stronger, more resilient plant for years to come. But timing is critical here. You want to plant while the soil is workable, but before buds begin to swell on the branches. This window might be only 2 or 3 weeks long in February. Miss it, and you will either be planting in mud or waiting until the plants have already broken dormancy. The moderate climate gardener uses February for infrastructure repairs as well. This is when you rebuild sagging trellises and reinforce raised beds. The work is easier without plants in the way. You can move freely through the garden space and make structural improvements. Check your irrigation system for winter damage. Replace cracked fittings and test zones to make sure everything functions before you need it desperately in May. Sharpen your tools and oil the wooden handles. Apply linseed oil to preserve the wood and prevent cracking and splintering during the intense work months ahead. These small acts of maintenance compound throughout the season. A sharp hoe makes weeding effortless. A well-oiled handle prevents blisters. The gardener who maintains their tools in February works with pleasure in July. The one who ignores maintenance fights against dull blades and uncomfortable grips. The warm climate gardener operates on an entirely different schedule. For them, February is not preparation for spring. It is spring itself. In zones 9 and 10, February is a month of active growth and continuous harvest. The garden never truly goes dormant in these regions. But this creates a different kind of challenge. The warm climate gardener must manage multiple seasons simultaneously. They are harvesting cool season crops that were planted in fall, while also starting warm season crops that will produce in summer. They are managing spring vegetables while also planning for the brutal heat that arrives in May and June. The warm climate February gardener focuses heavily on succession planting. This is the practice of planting small amounts every 2 to 3 weeks. Instead of planting all your lettuce at once, you plant a short row every couple of weeks throughout February and March. This creates a continuous harvest rather than a feast or famine cycle. You have fresh greens available for months instead of too much at once, and then nothing. The same principle applies to radishes, beans, and summer squash later in the season. Succession planting smooths out production and prevents waste. In warm climates, February is also the month to start watching for early pest emergence. Aphids and whiteflies can explode in population during the warm days. The observant gardener catches these infestations early when they are still small. A strong spray of water can knock aphids off plants before they establish colonies. Companion planting becomes more critical in warm climates. You need beneficial insects established early to manage pests biologically. Plant flowers that attract lasewings, ladybugs, and parasitic wasps. These allies will patrol your garden and keep pest populations under control naturally. Irrigation planning is another crucial February task in warm climates. The dry season is approaching fast, and water will become your most precious resource. Check your drip lines for clogs and leaks, replace worn emitters, and adjust flow rates to match the needs of different plant zones. Consider installing shade cloth structures in February before the heat arrives. Once temperatures climb above 95 degrees, many crops will struggle without protection. Tomatoes in particular will drop their flowers and refuse to set fruit in extreme heat. Shade cloth reduces stress and extends their productive season. The warm climate gardener also uses February to improve soil quality before the growing season intensifies. This is your last chance to add compost and amendment. Once you have planted your summer crops, disturbing the soil becomes difficult. But in February, you can still spread a rich layer of finished compost across your beds. This feeds the soil biology and provides a reservoir of nutrients. Your plants will draw on this fertility throughout the demanding summer month ahead. Mulch application is critical in warm, dry climates. A thick layer protects soil from the intense sun and reduces water loss dramatically. Ruth Stout's 12-inch blanket works even better in hot climates than it does in cold ones. It insulates against heat instead of cold. The warm climate gardener who mulches heavily in February will water half as much in August. The ones who skip this step will be slaves to the hose. Despite these regional differences, there are universal February principles that every gardener should embrace regardless of location. The first universal principle is the power of soil testing. February is the ideal month to test your soil pH and nutrient levels. Testing services are less busy in winter, so results come back faster, and you still have time to make amendments before the main planting season. Lime takes several weeks to adjust soil pH. If you test in April and discover your soil is too acidic, it is already too late to fix it for this season. But if you test in February and apply lime immediately, the soil has time to come into balance. Your plants will have access to nutrients that would otherwise be locked up. The second universal principle is the importance of seed inventory and germination testing. Do not wait until planting day to discover your seeds are no longer viable. Take out last year's leftover seed packets. Plant a few seeds of each variety on a damp paper towel inside a plastic bag. Check germination rates after the appropriate number of days. If less than half sprout, those seeds are too old and should be replaced. This simple test prevents the frustration of planting an entire row and waiting weeks only to discover nothing will grow. The third universal principle is the value of garden record. February is when you should review last year's notes while the information is still fresh. What varieties performed well? Which ones were disappointing and should be replaced? Where did disease problems emerge? What spacing worked and what was too tight or too loose? These observations are pure gold for improving your garden. But only if you capture them while you still remember the details. The gardener with good records builds on success and eliminates repeated mistakes. The one without records relearns the same lessons every single year. The fourth universal principle is seed starting setup. Whether you live in Minnesota or Florida, starting seeds indoors gives you control over timing and variety. Set up your grow lights and heat mats in February. Test them to make sure everything functions before you need them urgently. Gather your seed starting mix, containers, and labels. Having everything ready prevents last-minute scrambling when it is time to plant. The organized gardener works calmly and efficiently. The disorganized one wastes hours searching for supplies and second-guessing their timing. February is also the month to address what you should explicitly avoid. These are the mistakes that derail otherwise competent gardeners. The first mistake is premature outdoor planting driven by optimism rather than observation. A few warm days in February do not mean winter is over. Soil temperature matters more than air temperature. Seeds and transplants need warm soil to germinate and grow roots. If you plant warm season crops like tomatoes or peppers too early, they will sit in cold soil and sulk. They will be stressed, stunted, and vulnerable to disease. Wait until soil temperatures are consistently above the minimum for each crop. This patience will be rewarded with vigorous, healthy plants. The second mistake is over-fertilizing before plants are actively growing. Dumping synthetic fertilizers on dormant soil is wasteful and potentially harmful. Those nutrients will leach away with winter rain. They will pollute waterways instead of feeding your plants. Wait until you have planted and growth has begun. Then feed lightly and consistently rather than heavily all at once. The third mistake is ignoring tool maintenance. Dull, dirty tools make every task harder and more frustrating. A sharp spade cuts through soil like butter. A dull one requires twice the force and gives you blisters. A clean, oiled hoe glides through weeds. A rusty one sticks and catches and turns a simple job into hard labor. Spend a February afternoon maintaining your tools. Your future self will thank you every single time you reach for them. The fourth mistake is neglecting to check your stored harvest. If you have potatoes, onions, or winter squash in storage, inspect them regularly. One rotting potato can spread disease to the entire bin. Catching it early prevents the loss of your whole winter food supply. Remove any soft or sprouting vegetables immediately. Use them quickly or compost them before they contaminate the healthy ones. The philosophical dimension of February work deserves attention as well. This is the month that teaches patience and observation. Modern gardening culture encourages constant action and visible results, but February rewards the gardener who can be still and watch. You are building invisible infrastructure during this month: soil biology, root development, and structural improvements that pay dividends later. This work does not photograph well for social media. It does not generate immediate satisfaction or admiration from others, but it is the foundation of every successful growing season. The gardeners who skip February preparation will struggle all summer long. The ones who invest time and attention now will move through the season with ease and confidence. There is also something deeply satisfying about working in the garden during the quiet months. You have the space entirely to yourself. No mosquitoes, no sweat, no urgency. Just you, the soil, and the promise of what is coming. You can think clearly without distraction, plan carefully without pressure. This mental clarity is as valuable as any physical preparation. It allows you to design your season intentionally rather than reacting to chaos. Ruth Stout often spoke about the importance of working with nature's rhythms instead of fighting against them. February is where you learn those rhythms. You learn that soil has its own schedule, that plants respond to temperature and day length, not to your wishes or calendar dates. You learn that observation is more powerful than force, that knowing when to act is as important as knowing how to act. As February draws to a close, you should feel a sense of quiet readiness. Not excitement or anxiety, but calm confidence. Your tools are sharp and your soil is tested. Your seeds are ordered or started, and your garden plan is written down. You have pruned what needs pruning and repaired what needs repair. You have observed your land and noted its patterns. This preparation is invisible to the casual observer, but it is everything to the experienced gardener. The work you have done in February will echo through every month that follows. It will make March planting smooth and April growth explosive. It will prevent the July scramble and the August burnout. It will allow you to move through the season with grace instead of desperation. This is the gift of February, the quiet month that sets up the loud months to come. Do not rush past it. Do not wish for spring to arrive before its time. Instead, embrace the stillness. Do the unsexy work of maintenance and planning. Trust that every hour invested now will return to you tenfold when the growing season reaches its peak. February is not the month of harvest. It is the month of foundation. And foundations, while hidden from view, are what allow everything else to stand strong. Work your February according to your climate and your land, but work it with intention and care. The garden is watching. It will remember your attention when the time comes to produce, and you will move through the season not as a frantic worker, but as a calm steward of abundance. This is what February teaches. Preparation is not boring. It is powerful. Patience is not passive. It is strategic. And the gardener who understands the Hinge month will find that every other month opens more easily. Welcome to February, the month that separates dreamers from growers. Do the work now. Harvest the results later. Your future self is already grateful.